has nothing to do anymore with any endpoints whatsoever. Meaning, we'll see attackers using various forms of OAuth attacks to get authentication against a SaaS platform where they never touched an endpoint where the user was on. Like they didn't hack any a browser. They didn't find a vulnerability in the browser or on the endpoint or anything like that. They're just finding the nooks and crannies in SaaS and cloud and identity where they can hide, and they might get temporary access, and then they'll go in, they'll create an API key, and so where now that API key, in a way it's like the old run key in Windows back in the day, right? It's how you get access to the thing. So it goes much beyond just endpoints nowadays.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Pathfinders, the go-to podcast for everything you need to know about the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity, compliance, and digital resilience. I'm your host, Salvador Beltrano Viol, and in this podcast, we are diving into the challenges, innovations, and strategies that are shaping the cybersecurity landscape today. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a cybersecurity professional, or just someone curious about how businesses are protecting themselves in the digital age, this show is for you. Thanks for being here again. Today with us we have Maxime Lamothe, who is the founder of LimaCharlie, a trailblazing cybersecurity company delivering modern, scalable, and developer-friendly security infrastructure. With over 15 years of experience spanning from national defense, cutting-edge startups, and tech giants like Google and CrowdStrike, Maxime brings deep technical expertise and a bold vision for the future of cybersecurity. Without further ado, let's welcome Maxime to the show. Welcome, Maxime, to the show. And I believe that it's quite interesting to have you here, as your approach to cybersecurity innovation is quite different than what we see on many other companies, right? So you are the founder, and I believe that currently you're still in the leadership of LimaCharlie, right?
That's right.
And you guys do some cloud security and what you do. Explain a little bit of what your company focuses on.
Yeah, we do a lot in a way, but it's the approach to what we do that is really the difference. So what we do is we call that the SecOps Cloud Platform. And what that is that we're taking the same approach as a cloud provider does in IT, but to cybersecurity. Now that might be confusing a little bit. Like what does that mean exactly? Well, it's pretty simple. Essentially, we're building a cloud provider for cybersecurity, which means two big types of characteristics to the products that we make. So one is we operate like a cloud provider. So everything we do is self-serve, multi-tenant, build per usage, scale up, scale down, API first, right? So all the quality of how you work with a cloud provider. But the products that we have on this are for cybersecurity. So they're not, generic like IT, like virtual machines and stuff like that. Instead, they are things like agents and data retention layer and automation. And the way that we offer these, again, like a cloud provider, is what we call them as primitives, right? So AWS was sort of famous for describing what they did early on as undifferentiated heavy lifting. So we take that same approach. We say, what are all of the really hard parts of the heavy lifting of cybersecurity that is really well understood, that isn't special anymore? And what we do is that we offer those API first, so in a way that is very easy to integrate with or to connect with other ones. So think like Lego blocks, right? And that's what allows our users to use us in a bunch of different ways. So we've got we've got a lot of people that use us in services. So to build MDR or to build IR. where they need an agent to go in and use as an EDR. They need to do automated detection on this and automated response, and they need a data lake for that data to reside in, and then connect that into a SIEM. So things like that. And then we also have people that are building products. And in the same way that, if today you start a tech company, you're not going to rack and stack your own hardware. So we get people that build cybersecurity products that say, hey, if I pick the agent as an example, right? Like, hey, as a startup founder, I could raise $2 million and spend a year, building a team to go and build an agent. And then what I get at the end of this is a pretty mediocre agent that is the same as everybody else. Or I can just go to, a cloud provider, like a SecOps cloud provider, like LimaCharlie, and have an agent, in a multi-tenant way, pay as I go, be able to integrate with it, use it in the back end. I don't have to put anybody's logo anywhere, right? I can use it as infrastructure. So that's the type of offerings that we have in that SecOps cloud platform.
So at the end of the day, you act a little bit of that abstraction layer between the cloud provider itself, right, and the customer. So when the customer looks at your product, you guys are an integrated solution within security and the cloud. Instead of they having to purchase the cloud on one side or rent the cloud environment and resources and then have to worry about the security on top of it, right?
And not quite. The idea is we're not limited to the cloud at all. It's when we talk about the cloud, it's about how we deliver our service. Not so much that we're just operating in a cloud somewhere. So I'll give you an example, right? We a lot of our customers, again, maybe let's pick an MDR or an MSSP example. They have 100 customers on all kinds of platform, right? They have on-prem devices, they have Azure footprint, they have Office 365, all kinds of computing footprint. And that MSSP has to go and offer their monitoring service for that company, for their customer. And it's not just one customer, it's 100 customers. So they would come to use us because they can spin up a tenant in a couple of seconds. They can even use a credit card if they want to get going at first. And then they can go and they can say, hey, that customer has 500 endpoints, right? Windows, some Mac, some Linux. They can use our agent to go and deploy there. Then they can use our automation engine to go and have thousands of rules that look for malicious behavior in those agents. Then they might connect the Office 365 into our platform and start automating the detection of Office 365 telemetry. So it's a pretty wide scope.
That's quite more interesting because like if you were to work with the cloud only, then you become something like a software as a service, or you become part of the platform as a service. But this way you become a software as a service, so you can integrate with anything across the board.
Exactly. People think about us like most people, like we're different things to different people, right? Because we're built like a cloud, you don't have to take us wholesale. Like you can use one product or another, right? But most MDRs or MSSPs that use us, we become the mortar of their operation, right? We become that first layer where all of the EDR connects in and has the telemetry, and all of the audit logs from Azure comes in and they do detection, and then they forward parts of the data to their SIEM here or to this other product there. So we're kind of like that foundation.
That's interesting. So how did you came up with this idea of whatever EDR solutions that we are using right now, it's not working. Let's build something much better, scalable, and that it's cloud hosted.
I mean, it's a long story, right? In the sense that my background is that I've been in cybersecurity since about 2007. Right out of university, I was in intelligence in Canada, so I worked in Canadian intelligence for a while. A lot of my background was around endpoint, so endpoint technology, monitoring, attacks, all that stuff. And eventually, I pivoted from the SIGINT side to the defensive side, and then eventually went to CrowdStrike. So the early days of CrowdStrike. So I kind of saw the whole shift in marketing around, at the time it was like APT, right? Everybody was all about like sexy APT stuff. And then over time, people realize, well, it turns out like not a lot of people get it. There's a lot more than APT. And so the industry kind of started going down market, meaning they said, hey, this isn't so much to fight APTs. It's just the easy thing. You go and you deploy, and now you're magically safe. And so
Right.
that happened. Eventually, I made my way to Google internal security. And from there, I heard about a thing getting started in Google X, which is the experimental branch of Google. And so I joined the founding team there, and that's what became Chronicle Security. So I've kind of been through a lot of different places in the industry. But I would say that the commonality, there's a few data points that came into this. So one is I was always part of really good cybersecurity teams. And when in the early days, if you think of like Google 10 years ago, right, like really, really advanced. But what I've been seeing is that there's more and more of those advanced people in the industry. There's more and more people that, you tell them like, hey, I've got an EDR and I'm monitoring X, they get it. They know, they understand, they don't need to, know the brand or details, like they get it. So I could see that the sophistication in the industry was going up all the time. But then I could also see that, candidly, since 2007, nothing in the vendor space has changed. Like nothing. A couple of new technologies here and there, but if I'm to describe it, it's in 2007. Hey, there's 5 really, really big cybersecurity companies. They innovate by acquiring other companies. They put all of these products under one web portal, and then they sell big bundles of contracts into enterprise, like 3-year contracts for those bundles, like that the customer should have. Tell me what part of this has changed since 2007, right?
And I believe that part of it, like it is a little bit marred or driven by the sales, right? It doesn't matter how good or bad your product is. At the end of the day, there's only a handful of salesmen that have contacts in this and that and the other company, right? So once you get in the sales circle, you're going to sell the same way. And I believe that that's probably part of the reason why, even though we might have had the opportunity of innovating, the business models, or at least the way we sell things or we run things, it's kind of has remained constant, right?
That's right, and people just get used to it, right?
Yep.
Things are changing, but when we started, and we would go and we talk to people, we'd be talking to an MDR, and hey, love the product, this is great, and then or even before that, right? The first thing they would ask us is like, hey, what kind of NDA do I have to sign so that we can sign an agreement so we can get a demo? And it's like, what are you talking about? Or hey, we're ready to go and use the platform. What 500-page MSA do I need to sign so that I can resell that to more customers? And it took a lot of time to but we're seeing the change. People now realize more and more that, hey, it doesn't have to be this really heavy approach that those 5 companies are trying to push down. That model exists, and it's the cloud provider, and it's not just good for enterprise. It's that model, the cloud provider model, is fundamentally super good for the industry, right? Because it means that people that have ideas, that want to build innovation, they want to build new things, they can go and they can do that. They don't have to go and try to compete with the juggernauts by raising so much money, and then they're forced to sell kind of snake oil and then, this like big thing. They can just go and actually drive innovation in the space.
Absolutely, it allows for a better granularity, and then that allows for not only the more rapid deployment or whatever you want, but also, as you were saying, like it allows for the smaller players to be able to have a plate on the table, right?
Exactly, it's healthy.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting way. So you have all this baggage and you had all this knowledge and you saw the opportunity, right? And it seems that, I mean, working at Google, probably, you were able to see the ins and outs of the business model and how to use this cloudification model, right? The model that most of the clouds, I don't know how to describe it, right? Like this granular, scalable model that, as you said, it's basically based on the definition files and based on APIs. You don't have to go and have to go through the whole burden of going, installing, downloading, deploying everywhere, and then configuring everything all over, right? How do you foresee a change on how you guys started, or do you see a change of how you guys started doing things back when you created LimaCharlie compared to today? Because LimaCharlie is not something that was born yesterday, right? You guys have been in business for a couple years now.
Yes. Oh God, where to begin? I think some things have not changed. I'll kind of start with that. At a technical level, we had some pretty big convictions about what we were doing. So at a technical level, things like wanting to maintain very little infrastructure, wanting to start right away in the latest technology that we could use. Right. One advantage that we had as a new company was that we were not born 10 years ago. Right. Back in the day where you had to have a server. I've seen other vendors in that space where the discussion, you have a discussion about a POC, and like that first step is like, well, we're gonna have to like provision a server for you guys, and it's like, blows my mind. So there's a lot of those things that didn't change there. There's things also that didn't change in the conviction of how we do this. So mainly, really, what I'm thinking of is we wanted to be an infrastructure provider, right? In cybersecurity, if you look at the most large companies, they do it all, right? They are an EDR, they're threat intel, they're MDR, they are services, they're incident response. Like they do everything under the sun. We said, because our approach, right, is going to be like a cloud provider, we said, yep, no, we have to be neutral in the space. We have to be like AWS or GCP or whatever. We have to be this neutral ground where anybody can use us and do things with us without competing with us. And that was challenging. There's a lot of pressure in the early company of like, hey, could you monitor my company? And like it's just we really stuck to our guns there of not doing that, so that we could have that real thing. Now there's things that have changed. It's a constant adaptation, especially on the billing side of things. So my initial inclination when we started was, look, if we say we're building a cloud provider, how do you pay a cloud provider? Well, you pay them based on metrics of what you're using, right? It's consumption based, right? If you're using data store in Google Cloud, you pay per insert kind of thing. And we tried that briefly at the beginning. And we very quickly realized that, hey, we're pushing new concepts, so many different new concepts that we don't have to make our lives worse for ourselves, right? So we kind of had to meet the market a little bit. And we said, okay, people are used to thinking in terms of endpoints that they have deployed. Yeah. So we kind of transformed our billing to be a little bit closer to that. Interestingly, we've since then seen the pendulum start to swing the other way, where we have several of our customers where we had that discussion and they say, you know what, actually, we want to be billed per second. Like we want to be billed per connection second, per sensor, like per metrics. Yeah. So it's cool.
So how did you adjust a little bit? Because that I believe that that's quite a bit of transition, right? Originally, when you go from, okay, I'm going to bill you for how many megabytes or how many, like seconds of detection you run in our environment, and how many scans do I have to do, and what the compute power that at the end of the day is going to cost me to keep you safe, right? But when you move from there to like a flat rate, okay, there's like 10 sensors that you want to install in 10 machines. How did you do that translation? I mean, I imagine it was not a direct connection, right?
It is hard. It's still one of our OKRs to have more granular per tenant understanding of our costs. Um, because this is made even worse because uh, we wanted to be multi-tenant
Okay.
and we wanted to be in control of how we handled that multi-tenancy, which meant that we couldn't just kind of delegate that, right? Like if I take another legacy vendor like 10 years ago, starting in EDR, I talk often about endpoints just when I know best, but we do a lot, right? But 10 years ago, starting in EDR, okay, maybe they used to rack and stack a server. That's good. Then they kind of moved and like, well, we're going to provision a virtual machines. Okay, they made a step, right? So, but they still provisioned a single virtual machine for a single customer.
Yep.
And at a cost level, it's very, it raises your base cost very, very quickly, right?
Yep.
Because now you can't say I have a free tier because no, that machine's going to cost me.
Right. It's completely inefficient to scale like, across different customers because at the end of the day, when you spin up a virtual machine, the smallest amount of virtual machine that will operate that operating system that you're going to run over, it's probably going to be the same machine if they have like 5 sensors that they have 1 sensor. So unless you can
Exactly.
share the other 4 sensors, you're basically wasting compute power.
Exactly, exactly. Unfortunately, we kind of traded that to a world where we say, hey, one of our compute nodes in the cluster has, I don't know, 16 CPUs and, I don't know, 64 gigs of RAM. Can I say what percentage of those CPUs are given for a specific tenant? Like,
Right.
that's brutal. So I mean, the real answer to this is you have to look at it pretty holistically. And so it's twofold, right? So you look at it holistically, meaning at the current, at my current revenue level, at my current pricing, how much is my infrastructure costing me? That's kind of the like the top level, and then you kind of say like make that average, right?
Yeah.
The other part, however, is guardrails. Always, when deploying a new service or a new product, to think early on around abuse guardrails. And I don't mean abuse in like a nefarious person trying to do something bad. It's more sometimes people just don't know, right, the thing that they're doing, and they're just running this Python script that calls this thing like 100,000 times per second, and
It
for
can
you it's a
happen. Yeah.
write.
I,
Yeah.
I got it from Stack Overflow.
Right. Exactly, exactly. So doing things like rate limiting, to put the guardrails, also doing the opposite, meaning every every single thing at all times must be designed to scale horizontally, which is challenging. Like it's just, I at least I think of when I was in computer science, that is not how we thought about it, right? Like
Yeah.
it was never
You were
thought that
supposed to
way.
create a system that was supporting the next 5 years and then leave it there until, luckily, in the next 10 years, you will have enough budget to go and replace it and then scale it back for.
Exactly, exactly. It's like I wrote it in Perl and it works. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, sure, but
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what are some of the challenges that you see? How do you see the future of the EDR endpoint or any of the products that you see? There's a clear movement of most companies trying to go to the cloud, and right now, one of the biggest tech trends, right? It's integrating AI on everything. Um, how do you see that working for you guys in LimaCharlie?
um, yeah. So there's there's sort of two questions. I think the endpoint, will remain relevant for a good while longer. Now, it is becoming a commodity. That's kind of our whole point, right? Is that EDR is table stakes. It's all of the things that you do with it that kind of matter. Like the agent itself, nobody really cares. So I believe that one of the next frontiers, in a way, and we're seeing a lot more of this now, is the idea that as we move to more and more cloud providers, we move to more and more SaaS. Whereas the old complexity core used to be on the endpoint, it used to be Windows, right? Like so much complexity in Windows and how you run programs. This concept and this attack surface and this surface for bad people to hide in is less emphasized on the endpoint now. Now it's in cloud providers, IAM, identity, SaaS, all of these things. Like that's the new operating system. We're seeing attackers hiding in all kinds of ways people, configure API keys and all of that stuff. So I think that's the next big area.
And I heard that we move from being the endpoint, the computer or the end device, the user device, the edge where you want to stop the attack at. Right now I hear that a lot of the newer security models or security companies are trying to focus security on the browser level. So if you're using all these different software as a service and whatnot, like you are going to access it most of the time with a thin client, that's just a web page, right? Or something that runs over your browser itself. So how do you see that in your industry or in LimaCharlie being maybe a possibility?
So yes, but I'd say it even goes beyond that. Where to a point where it has nothing to do anymore with any endpoints whatsoever. Meaning, we'll see attackers using various forms of OAuth attacks to get authentication against a SaaS platform where they never touched an endpoint where the user was on. Like they didn't hack any, a browser. They didn't find a vulnerability in the browser or on the endpoint or anything like that. They're just finding the nooks and crannies in SaaS and cloud and identity where they can hide, and they might get temporary access, and then they'll go in, they'll create an API key, and so where now that API key, in a way, it's like the old run key in Windows back in the day, right? It's how you get access to the thing. So it goes much beyond just endpoints nowadays.
That's quite interesting. And how do you see AI playing a role in like the general world of security?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the real answer, and I would challenge anybody that thinks they know the real answer, which is we don't know. I think it's too early, right? Like, I see all of the Copilot. If the Copilots are the pinnacle of how we use AI, well, that'll be sad. Like, it's good, it's cool, but it hasn't truly revolutionized anything. I think it's the innovation that we're still seeing that's being done in the industry, where in 5 years we'll look back and have figured out where the true value was in leveraging AI.
Yep, and I'm in agreement. Like that right now, at the beginning, like 2 years ago, when you saw AI being deployed everywhere, it was a little bit disappointing, if I'm honest. Because everybody will announce every single product with AI, the AI or the machine learning doing exactly what a well-educated programmer can do, with a little bit of time. So at the end of the day, they were just simply replacing this library that's human-written by this other library that's machine learning generated, and I don't really know the nuances behind it. And maybe break your product once or twice, but don't worry about it. But I'm in complete agreement, because as we have these AI engines or products out in the wild for a longer time, I believe the companies are going to try to start narrowing where these intelligences are actually able to get the best bang for the buck, right? At the end of the day, you can use AI for everything, but why would you use AI to turn on a lamp if you can just set the timer, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think all of this kind of explains our approach to AI, which is, uh, our philosophy of what we're building is that we want to take the parts that are really well understood in cybersecurity and make them, drastically available. And the truth is, AI applications don't fit in that, right? They're not already well understood. Like, we don't know. So instead, our approach is to try to be the best platform possible for these AI startups to build a product and go to market quickly, right? So that if you have an idea of how you can use AI to drive automated detection and response on an endpoint, you don't have to, from the get-go, reinvent the wheel completely. You can go and just say, you know what, for now, we're just going to use those agents as APIs and deploy that and then prove the actual part of this where you're truly doing that innovation. And right now, not the beauty of it, it's sad for the industry, but I'm happy that we're doing it because nobody else is doing it, right? You go to CrowdStrike and try to tell them, hey, I want to build my AI product on top of CrowdStrike. Okay, get ready to hire a lot of lawyers and figure out and just, sell your firstborn to their marketplace and all of that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You have to marry them and remain with them for the next 15 years and make sure they have first right to buy in everything you create. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. So how you were saying now about like when you deploy in these different environments and whatnot, what role do you think automation plays in the deployment of your sensors, right, or even in the integration? Because you have this environment in the cloud, but if you end up installing some sensors or whatnot in an on-prem machine or somewhere that runs in a different cloud, what approach are you guys taking on that?
Yeah, that's good timing because before now, we did not used to have a really good answer to that. Let me rephrase kind of that, right? The way that we would hear that question from customers is, hey, I've got LimaCharlie deployed on these 100 endpoints, but I know that I have an Azure footprint and I don't know if I'm deployed everywhere, right? Like, how do I know that I'm deployed everywhere, that my coverage is full, that it's, that my automation's working?
So they needed some help with the visibility of their environment. And that's something that seems to be pretty common all over the place, right? Most of the clients that I end up working with, one of the first questions, right, when you go anywhere and try, they express to you what their security needs. And it's like, okay, what do you have? And it's like, things in places.
Exactly. Oftentimes the information exists and is available, but it's not brought in together. It's not, meshed or stitched together.
That's
So
fair.
that's
Especially bigger companies or medium-sized companies where they have their AWS expert, their Azure expert, or whatnot. They still don't speak to each other.
exactly. And I think you can apply that concept to many different aspects of cybersecurity, right? There's the inventory management, there's the vulnerability management that feels very similar in many cases, right? Like, I've got, these versions of the software deployed, but you can keep expanding that quite a bit into, hey, maybe your company is, maybe it's a software development company and you have GitHub repositories. Do you know all of the GitHub repos that exist and the permission, right? So this concept of inventory, in a way, can be diluted, can be very fuzzy and applied to a lot of things.
And
That's what we're, yeah.
yeah, it keeps evolving because, as you were saying, like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when the S-bomb concept came along, like, oh, now we need to understand what's behind all these different products, right? Because as you said, you might know your main repo, but do you know this repo, which other libraries come from? Like where is it pulling from? Because maybe you're safe. I mean, your code might be right, but maybe the guy that did that math operation that you got out of that wonky forum, maybe that guy was not as versed in security practices as you are.
Exactly. So we're trying to bring some core capabilities to LimaCharlie to make that easy for people. And again, because of our approach, it's not going to be, hey, click on this, now you're magically safe from everything. No, that's not reality, sadly. So it's going to just be capabilities so that cybersecurity professionals can start applying their know-how and build offerings very, very easily. And I say build, I don't mean program. It's usually just assembling the right bits of the Lego blocks in LimaCharlie to now start offering vulnerability management, for example.
Nice. So you guys not only work in the machine discovery and have a generic vision, right, like scanning all the things, but you also have something that will work with a more codified, like any repos and whatnot, that you also work in that space.
Yeah. So we're already gathering what we call telemetry, right? It's audit logs or events from endpoints, from cloud providers, from SaaS, from pretty much everything under the sun. So the data is already coming in. It's a question of finding the right way to make it alertable, to make it easy to contextualize between all of them, to be able to query, right, for the right questions in this data set. So that's kind of the big part that we're working on.
Nice. That seems like you guys are keeping ahead of the curve pretty good.
We're trying, right? We just want to take care of all the boring parts of cybersecurity and get people that build really cool things right on top of our platform.
Nice. So speaking about these staying ahead of the curve or whatnot, what kind of trends or shifts in the cloud space you have been observing from your customers' needs?
I mean, it's interesting. There's some new aspects that are coming out, right? Like I think, like the previous part of the discussion we had around, SaaS is the new operating system in a way.
Right.
So we certainly see more focus on that, but truthfully, we see that there's still a lot of challenge in the basics and the staples. And one challenge we very commonly see with people that we talk to, and especially in services space, is that there's this one vendor, this one vendor that offers this one point solution on a 3-year contract. They have no idea of the concept of multi-tenancy, and they don't have an API that we can use. So we're trying to offer this to our customers, but it's a challenge, right? It's super expensive, all of these things. So I think we see a lot of that type of challenge still. And truthfully, like, we're just trying to give some love to service providers there.
Right. So not only to actually help them, to stay ahead of the curve in security, but also like bring them all together, and you're trying to like bring their IT level to a point of automation and infrastructure as a code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that point where they get the flexibility and the speed of deployment that other companies might have.
Exactly. We can drastically change the kind of underlying equations that they think of when they build their services, right? Like, how many FTEs are managing your current data lake, right? We talk to people sometimes, it's like, there's a whole team managing Elastic. And it's like, like that doesn't sound right. And it's not necessarily a sexy problem from a point vendor, like a point solution vendor that tries to be the new hot thing and Gartner term in cybersecurity. But you know what? Solving that problem for those service providers is going to have a huge impact on thousands and thousands and thousands of actual people in the real world that, use those service providers to stay safe.
Absolutely, especially when you work with those MSSPs, right? That you're not impacting only them, but everybody that they touch too.
Hey, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, so I will thank you very much, Maxime, for coming here today
My
and
pleasure.
sharing your insights with us. So, last quick question: if somebody were to start with cloud security, which are the three top practices that you will recommend anybody to take a look at, or at least demonstrate some interest on the cloud security space?
Honestly, I think it applies to cybersecurity at large. And my biggest advice is get your hands dirty. Uh, Learn the fundamentals. Learn the underlying way that things work. Don't learn a specific product. I think it's very dangerous for anybody to go and say, "Hey, this one vendor, that's really cool. I understand that one vendor," without necessarily understanding what is being done under the hood, how it's being done, and that is what's going to give your career the most longevity and I think have a rewarding career from that.
Nice. Thank you. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.